in this episode of the Critical Oxygen podcast.
Instead of like, we're, just doing more, right? Because you're probably, especially people who are endurance athletes, you're already inclined to this perfectionism, overdoing things. Like, is like, what are you deprioritizing in order to prioritize these other things, right? Like, where are you pulling back so you can do more kind of thing? And that I think is where people, they're like, how can I do more? And I'm like, I'm not going to have a 17-step morning routine because I literally don't have the bandwidth for it, but I can block social media and take my dog for a walk.
Welcome to the Critical Oxygen podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Alyssa Olenick. She has a PhD in exercise physiology and is the founder of Doc List Fitness and the creator of the List Method, where she designs transformative strength, endurance, and hybrid training programs. She's a certified sports nutritionist, CrossFit Level 2 trainer, ultramarathon runner, and strength athlete herself. Alyssa lives the principles she teaches, much like I try to do. Her mission is to translate complex science into accessible strategies that empower clients to thrive, whether that's in the gym, on the roads, or exploring trails. Dr. Olenick bridges the gap between research and results-driven training. Dr. Alyssa Olenick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I am super excited. For those of you who don't know who Dr. Olenick is, she is a superstar in terms of like the Instagram world and like those sort of things. And I started following her because I'm always looking for, more science-backed, PhDs and coaches and those sort of things. So go give her go check out her Instagram because she's really, really providing a lot of awesome content for individuals who want to be, kind of trail runners, hybrid athletes, or, just strength training in general as well. So first, let's just start with a brief introduction to, who is Alyssa Olenick. That's okay. That's not brief.
Don't worry. I've done a lot of podcast interviews, so I've learned how to truncate my story because I am,
right.
I sometimes forget I am a very cool person who does a lot of things and wears a lot of hats and does a lot of things, I used to say jack of all trades, master of none, but I think I'm a master of few now. So, the Alyssa Olenick backstory is I grew up an athlete. I used to be the girl that would like run after school, lifted in the gym with the boys and the football players. Like I was just so obsessed with being an athlete and sport and getting better. And I love to work out and I love fitness. And I love the way it made me feel. I did it for sport, but then I just really fell in love with it itself. My master's and graduate essays for getting into grad school tell the story of me as a teenager running on the back roads of my hometown and just feeling invincible and being like, I want to share this with everyone. And that just really being a catalyst for the rest of my life of just like, wow, I want to share this with everyone. And then I learned you can become a scientist and get a doctorate in exercise. I was like, bet, because I thought I wanted to be like a Nike elite trainer. Like that's what I went to college wanting to do. And then I got into science and I was like, hey, I'm actually good at school. Like I didn't really have that identity growing up. I was an athlete. I wasn't a bad student, but I wasn't like, oh, you're the super smart brainiac. You know what I mean? Like I was just a good student, but I only cared about sports and having fun more than anything. And so, I played lacrosse for my first 2 years of college and I love sports and it was really hard to walk away from it. And I was really, really good at school, but I rode the bench is basically the way I describe it. Highest GPA, lowest playing time. And so I knew graduate school was in the cards for me. And I left my lacrosse team and focused and doubled down on school, knowing that I wanted to do graduate school. I got into research. I got really excited by that and the potential I learned about all these opportunities in my life. But I thought that athletics was something I had to leave behind when I quit, and that was really hard for me. And instead, I kind of just dove into the world of fitness and continuing my athleticism beyond sport. I did a few Tough Mudders that first few years out of it. I started getting way more into lifting. I was doing hybrid training, essentially is what I was doing. I teach in group fitness classes, lifting, running all the time. I never really competed in like a ton of road races. I did those Tough Mudders. Eventually, I competed in a few strength, and I did a strongman in college, and a powerlifting meet, and like was having a lot of fun just getting really strong and training hard. And I was still running while doing all that stuff. And then I started my master's in exercise physiology and started to learn more about exercise and all of that stuff. Started my Instagram because I just wanted to share the things that I was learning in my powerlifting journey with others. But I started to drink that Kool-Aid of, lifting kills your gains or running kills your gains. So I stopped running as much and I got really into powerlifting and I got really strong. and really unfit. And it's funny because I got to do VO2 max test across all of my graduate school and undergraduate work. So I have
Uh-huh.
like, I kind of have like tracked my VO2 like across my lifespan to see how like that has fluctuated across time and DEXA and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I got to a point where I remember I took like my first big outdoors trip and I was so out of shape. It felt terrible. And I was like, never again. So I just like
Yep.
dove right back into like what would be considered now hybrid training, but I was just running a ton and still lifting and doing like step ups and preparing for that. And I felt really good and really capable. And then I decided to train for my first trail half. And then I was like, wait, is this like, I could do an ultra? And that was like when I set sights on that goal. And so I started my PhD um, and decided to launch a business, train for my first ultra marathon, and also start my PhD at the same time. Really
Yeah.
normal
You
thing.
you were doing just a little bit of stuff.
Just because that's the most Alyssa thing to do all the time. And that's where really things started to be catalyst for me. I did a ton of ultra marathons while training, while getting my PhD. I did most of them while getting my PhD. I've done
Nice.
17 and like 15 of those, or 13 or 15 of those were like in my PhD or something like that.
Insane.
I was still lifting a ton. I competed in like one Olympic weightlifting meet during that time, but I just didn't have any interest in competing and lifting. I like to be strong and train hard, but I liked what it allowed me to do outside of the gym more. That excited me a lot more. And so during this
Right.
time, I was launching and starting my coaching and training business as like a side thing. I never intended for it to be my main career. I wanted to be a researcher, an academic, a professor. Like that was my main goals. But when COVID hit and that pandemic messed everything up, that really altered my future and career plans. And there's a lot more unknown. So I doubled down on my business. I was training for my first 100K at that point in time. I didn't know if I'd be a postdoc or a job or even be able to finish my dissertation. It was a very stressful period of time for me. Um,
Absolutely.
so I ended up, getting a postdoc, eventually completing that in menopause and metabolism. I'm still working on some of that work now as well. And still growing and doubling down my business because it was the most secure career option for me and it was doing
Mhm.
very well. And so that's kind of my main thing right now. But through the years of that, it's been really fun because the point of all this is that I've not only like been in school and learned a lot about human metabolism and exercise physiology and all of these and sports nutrition, all this stuff, but like I have really done it all and I've practiced it and tried it. And I think that there's something really potent about having as much knowledge as like someone like you or me do from our training and our background, but then seeing and applying it in your own training
Mhm.
and practice allows you to, I don't know, it makes things click so much more. It makes me a better coach. It makes me a better communicator. It just
Yep.
makes that understanding of everything heightened. Um, I think about like my mitochondria when I'm out doing things sometimes, and I'm like, oh, this is what they're doing right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my husband has his PhD as well, and he's like, you can't feel your energy system shifting. I'm like, I swear to God, you
I
can if
swear I
you're
feel it.
really paying attention. You can feel them shifting. So yeah, and I just kind of doubled down on all of that the last few years, and it's been really fun. And I've become. It's funny because I think I was. Besides Alex Viada, I think I was one of the only few early adopters of hybrid training in the online space until it
Mm.
became like the trend it is today. Like I wrote an ebook called Hybrid in 2021. Like my programs
Wow.
offered lifting and running as early as 2018. Like I kind of my whole shtick has been the hybrid training thing
Yeah.
since the get-go. Because I was always hybrid training in some way or another, right? I was an athlete. I've always kind of ran. I've always, lifted in some way or capacity. But really, the last few years, I've definitely tried to maximize that more in many ways in
Mhm.
the true hybrid sense. But yeah, that's kind of my thing. I am a recreational athlete. I train hard and, I'm not putting up any elite times, but I am, I have a PhD and I've done the
Yeah.
research and the data and I'm coaching and training the people along the way with it. So it's been really fun to kind of see all those things come together the last few years. But yeah, that's me. Doing it
That's
all, doing
yeah.
everything and
That
all the time.
you sound like your story really resonates with me because I was always kind of trying to, it's like get the most out of my physiology. And that's actually why personally I went into academia because I was like, well,
Yeah.
if I just know more, then I'll be an Olympic level athlete. Like that, I knew I never was going to be just because of, genetic limitations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it it really resonates with me because and I actually extended it a bit further. I actually have a tendency to overdo, the things that I, train and do. So I've had a lot of injuries. I had a hip injury that led to Achilles injuries that then, like all of these sort of things. And it, for me, I help the people who are like, oh, well, I overdid it. And
Yeah.
have you ever had like times where you're just like, oh, I can't do all of this stuff, and then it like leads to injuries and those sort of things?
So yes and no. So one, I'll say I definitely have I have like my client buckets, and one of them is the do-it-allers. And I feel like so much of my time is spent convincing them that if they do less, they won't lose fitness or explode, and that actually will
Yes.
be better. I feel there's a lot, and that's a hard because you have to do less and for long enough to trust that it's fine. But that
Right.
trust continuum is hard. So yes and no. I think that I didn't really follow progressively consistent programs until my PhD. I always just kind of did random training. I went to the gym with really no plan. I deadlifted 400 pounds without following a program. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was
Jeez,
just
yeah.
like YOLOing my lifting. And there was like some loose structure to stuff, but like, you don't really learn how to program anything in graduate or master's or
Mm-mm.
bachelor's levels exercise science. People don't realize that. Like, you
No,
don't know anything about programming. No one
no.
teaches you anything. So I had to learn a lot of that. And I was definitely taking a like, I was doing a little bit of strength training, a little bit of running, a little of CrossFit type stuff. It was very haphazard. I mean, like the principles were there. Like I was doing heavy
Right,
sets of 2, 3 singles. Eventually you're going to adapt and get stronger. Like that works
right.
kind of thing. Right. But I didn't follow a progressive program until my PhD, and I have hypermobility. So I felt inflamed and my body hurt and I had aches. And I always have had like a history of like little nags and niggles and things picking up, but I never really had like a super big injury. I had, like my back was an issue at one point in my master's. So I like missed a month of training from that. And then I never really had a big injury otherwise until my Achilles, then hip thing that I had in my PhD. And that was just the perfect storm of losing fitness from being in my PhD, trying to do speed work, probably and doing double unders with CrossFit and then wearing
Yeah.
heels at a conference. And it just like was like the perfect storm of too much volume
Oh,
and stress on it. I swear to God, when I say my Achilles injury, like the catalyst of it was I went out dancing in heels at a conference with my friends. Like, but I
yeah.
did a speed workout that morning. You know what I mean? So like I think it was just like the perfect storm of like my Achilles that day was like volume threshold cross. Nope.
Yep.
No more. So, but
Yeah.
besides that, because of hypermobility, my whole life is a game of cat and mouse of what my body can handle versus what I want it to handle versus what we
Mhm,
can do. So like
mhm.
that's and I've coming to terms with that the last maybe 5 or so years, maybe 6, 7 at this point in time. I don't know when this really I clicked with this and more, but um I had to learn with that, especially being in my PhD, which I know you've talked about a lot. Like I had to be more efficient with my time, but
Mhm,
specifically if you're doing hybrid training or running, you need to be more efficient with your strength because that's the
mhm.
place where you can cut corners and still make progress or maintain and have quality. But there's that volume component. Yes, it's important for strength work, but like endurance and cardio, it is a little bit more like driving the needle forward. Like you're not going to run an ultra marathon on 10 miles a week. Like
No.
even if they're all in zone 4, like you're just not going to do that, right? So, for me, I started to learn this cat and mouse game and balance of like when can I push versus pull and like being a lot more, I always tell my clients or people like you can train at high volumes, but they're earned. You just can't wake up one day and get to them. So if we want to
Yeah.
get there, we can. It has to be systemic and strategic. But sometimes that means like you're not doing 3 metcons a week and 5 runs a week and 3 lifts a week and not taking a rest day and doing
Yep.
recovery cardio on your recovery day. Like there's smart ways to do it. So I feel like really during my PhD, I started to double down and start training more like an athlete again. It was a little bit like less haphazard, having fun, doing random workouts with my master's
Mhm.
friends and, whatever just sounded good that day. And it worked a lot more. Shockingly, progressive overload,
Weird.
consistent training, monitoring your training volume and variables,
Mhm.
it worked. And I was doing CrossFit during some of that periods of time. Like I still was doing like constantly varied fitness for some of it, but I like took bits and pieces of it. Like I was following a
Yeah.
structured strength plan and made the metcons be specific to that, complement with my training, and then oscillated like training versus metcon volume and the on versus off season of my running versus lifting and whatever I was doing
Yeah.
that. And that's when I started to get really smart with it. Um, and I have had a lot of history of like plantar fasciitis issues and that kind of stuff since I played lacrosse growing up. Like that was always my biggest injury was my like plantar fasciitis. I have an extra tendon in my knee that gets inflamed sometimes.
Hmm.
Then this glute and Achilles thing and ankle stuff. So for me, but those are all related to my hypermobility. My body's
Right.
chirpy and it's so sensitive to rapid increases in volume and intensity. So I baby it. But a lot of people are always like, you have hypermobility. How do you do what you do? And I'm like, because I'm smart. I do repeatable, progressive, monitorable training that doesn't
Mhm.
overload my body at any point in time. And I make a lot more progress that way, actually,
Yeah.
honestly. It works really, really well. So, I've been lucky that I've only had one like that Achilles injury was the plague of my life for like a year. It felt Achilles takes so long to recover. It
Yeah.
takes
And then
so
and then
long.
you think they're recovered, and then you increase your volume or you increase your intensity just a little bit too much. And then it's like, oh shit, now I can't run for, another 2 weeks.
Oh
I
my
literally just
God.
made a post about this like yesterday where it was a graph showing like, your progress with consistent
Oh
training and
yeah,
then
yeah.
your
I saw you do that.
progress. Yeah, with like chasing, like all the other shit that people chase. I get messages all the time because I'm more like the endurance side of things rather than hybrid. And people
Yeah.
are like, oh, should I do the Norwegian double days? I'm like, no, because you don't need to chase any more intensity. Like right now, like for most people, 99% of the population,
Yeah.
that's not a good idea.
I like
And
that my token saying is you're not fit enough to worry about that. And that's
yeah,
me too. Like, I'm not fit enough to
yeah,
worry about a lot of this stuff. Like, people are like,
yeah,
"Are you sure I don't need 2 quality sessions a week?" And I'm like, "If you're doing 1 and you're getting fitter and it's working, then you don't
yeah,
need more." Like,
yeah,
more doesn't make it better. Like, if it's working, keep doing it.
yep,
Like, find other areas to increase volume if you have the time, but, like, if that's working, you don't need more. Like,
yep.
just because you wanna do more doesn't
Or
need
just
mean you
because you've
need more.
heard, just because, somebody
Yeah.
else is saying you have to do more. Like, and this is the challenge between like the research side of things versus the application side of things is if you look at the research, right, there's a lot of block periodization. It's really short, time frames in terms of the studies. And yeah, like, don't get me wrong, human studies are really freaking hard to do. So
Mhm.
those are the limitations. They cost a lot of money. And you couldn't do a 52-week intervention because then you would never get your PhD. Like that's that's
No, you
ultimately what it
can't.
comes down to.
No. And that yeah,
Um,
and that's the thing is I don't think people realize too how high of training volumes the people who are doing double intensity, double threshold, high volume days are doing in a week. Like, you are
yeah,
not an elite athlete. These people, if they're triathletes, they're doing what, 20, 25, 30 hours a week of training.
yeah,
And if they're running athletes, they're still doing 10, 15, 20 hours a week of training, whether that's like you're just most people don't fall into those
yeah,
buckets. They just
yeah,
they just don't, right? And so it sucks to hear, but it's like okay, but like, let's focus on the things that we know do work
hmm
and can work. And that's why I always like to tell people, I'm like, you're not fit enough to worry about that. And that doesn't mean that
yeah,
you're not fit. That doesn't mean you're not a piece that you're a piece of crap. That doesn't mean that your training isn't valuable. It means like you just aren't in that 99% of people where
hmm
that actually might be something that you do or you're applying or you're playing with. Or maybe that's something that you're bringing in like in a peak block of a marathon training cycle because you have the ability to do it on like the bike, like we were talking about before we came in.
right, right,
Right, or the elliptical. Like, I have a friend who does a lot of double days, but she can't handle the running volume because of past injuries, but she'll do, like, her double thresholds on the elliptical later in the
mm,
day to make up for the volume that she couldn't handle in her running, but, like, that's a
yeah,
strategic specific thing she's doing with a coach where they're monitoring it and saying, "Hey, let's pull this back from the running and put it here, not let's add this on to everything else that we're doing
yeah,
already," right? And it's hard to explain that to people, but yeah, yes. Doing less but better has been my approach to a lot of things.
yeah,
With the caveat of we talked about this earlier, is like sometimes endurance stuff though takes volume and it takes time to get better at.
yeah,
And you can't cheat that. You really can't. You can within reason, but you can't depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve.
yeah, yeah. I 100% agree with that. Most of my messaging is for people who want to do 5K, 10K half marathon. So, when I say, oh, yeah, you can do this on, 7 hours of training or less per week, that's typically what I'm talking
You
about.
know
And
what's
then
so
it's
funny? I
like,
have a YouTube video where I told people my minimum standards for running a 50K was 6 hours per week, and I had people in the comments mad at me for saying that was too much. It wasn't necessary. You don't need to train that much. You only need 6 weeks and like 3 hours a week. And I was like, okay. So it's so funny for you to say 7 hours a week or less for like 5K, 10K half, because
that's
it's like I
that's like maximum, right? Like
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
what,
yeah.
but
It's just so funny to hear that because I think about, like, the different messages people get in the online
yeah,
space. Because I remember I got
yeah.
so much backlash. I was like, "That's not an unrealistic minimum training volume for 32 miles, guys." Like,
No,
that
no,
is
not
a
at all.
very,
I
like,
did.
practical amount of training.
Yeah, like I did my first 50K with about 7 hours of training per week, but I was walking like 20 or 30K steps a day. So it
Mhm.
was like 7 hours of like specific training and then just walking everywhere because I was walking, for my PhD, walking around
Yeah.
campus doing like those sort of things. And I still barely got to the finish line in one piece. Like I was like I was wrecked the next week after my first 50K. So it's like yes, you probably could get across the finish line in 3 hours a week, whoever the commenters were.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you you still want to be like okay, like you don't want to just be in complete shambles afterwards.
This is a big conversation I have with clients a lot because I think people really underestimate. I know we're not really on topic for our questions, but I feel like this is valuable
That's
tip
okay.
anyway. They want to go from 0 to a direct linear increase to their training goal. So A to
Yep.
B in a direct line. Every week we're increasing our long run. Every week we're increasing our mileage. We get to our goal, check. And you can do that, but you will feel a lot better if you repeat weeks of the same volume. You have a
Yep.
base build phase. You repeat the long runs, especially those key long runs where it starts to get hard and it doesn't feel good the first time you do it. Like it's not like you just adapt to it the first time that you do it. And next week your
Right.
body's like, yep, okay, we can add 2 miles and we're gonna be golden, right? We get that backlash a lot and my longer distance plans are like, why am I repeating my long run? I was like, did you feel like it was super easy the first time you ran
Yeah.
16 miles like on trail, which takes a lot longer? Or did you feel like you needed to like, maybe practice that a little bit more, right? Because that was like our hard milestone transitions. And I don't think people realize there's a big difference between training to complete something and training to perform or training to like even feel good, right? Like we
Yeah.
get so many clients. I feel like the half marathon is the distance that gets bastardized the most. The people Barney Stinson it all the time. And my favorite thing with clients is like, hey, I actually did like a longer build or follow the program progressively or stacked programs in a row before getting to it. And I actually not only enjoyed my training, my long runs never felt terrible. And the race actually felt good. I was like, that
Hmm.
is adapting. That is better fitness.
Yes.
That itself, it's
Yes.
maybe not the sexy, fancy PRs or faster paces, but like handling your training volume and adapting to it and giving yourself more time to adapt because aerobic fitness adaptations just take painfully long. They're just
Hmm.
painfully long. You don't get that like newbie gains boost really like you do with lifting in the same kind of way. It's like, oh,
You can a little bit if you do like sprint interval training and
yes.
you over apply the high intensity. Like
Yes.
that would be the only caveat to that I would give.
Yes. No. And that's in like the first, what, 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks. And then
Yes,
after
and then
that,
you're
you're like,
extremely
oh,
limited.
yeah. But I always tell people, I'm like, you're going to have a breakthrough in your fitness, like maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, and you're going to have a run or a workout. You're like, oh, wow, I'm getting fitter. And then it's
Mm.
back to like, oh, nothing is happening for like
Yep.
another block and a half of training because you're just, chugging along at, I'm always like, you're sending little signals to your body over and over and over and
Yeah.
again. And eventually it's like, okay, we get the point. Here we go.
Yep.
We give in. You're going to keep doing this. We have to adapt to it. And then you have like that breakthrough thing. You just don't have that. I feel like that rewarding feedback as frequently because it just is such a especially
Yeah.
the long endurance stuff, like or the base or the volume work, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm sure you read that recent paper that came out that essentially showed that with sprint and hit training in the 4 to 6 weeks, you see these immediate boost, but then
Yeah.
the endurance training comes chugging along long
Hmm.
term for the same thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think people realize that you can train and feel good while training for things.
Yeah.
And that is huge.
I love that messaging that you're putting out there. And for my training, actually, what was the most successful thing is like I would not increase my workout volume. So like if I was doing an intense day, I wouldn't add another interval until I got to the point where it was 2 weeks in a row I plateaued the performance in that interval, for example. And sometimes that would take 6 or 8 weeks. Like I was actually like, would slightly improve, speed, like, for 6 to 8 weeks. And then I'd retest because I have like a mobile physiology lab. So I would retest on myself, be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, let's see where we're at. And it was only after the 6 or 8 weeks. And people like, they just want to jump to all these different things because they've heard, oh, you could do muscle confusion or you got to do this. It's like, no. If you're progressing from like the performance that you're doing, and progression doesn't mean, like doing more. It could mean just being like, well, I felt better during my long run week to week to week. And you don't have to add more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I have this
but
chart of like if it's from a post that's like about overtraining, but it's like should I pull back? But it's the same thing works for should I do more? And it's like, am I making progress at the volume that I'm at? Yes. Keep doing it.
yeah,
It's like, and
yeah.
there's a difference, right? Like for me, I'm intentionally trying to bring up my running volume again. I've only been running like 20 to 25 miles a week while doing like high rocks training. But I increased
Hmm.
my intensity significantly compared to what I was doing last year. So I like brought back the volume a lot to handle
Hmm.
that increase in intensity, especially with my history of injuries. I had a lot of stress from travel. I had 2 big international trips. I just knew that I was like, it wasn't the time to increase volume while also
Mm-mm.
increasing that training, right? And I got fitter on less volume but more intensity. That does
Yeah.
work. It's not that it's approach that doesn't work, especially coming off of like running as much just easy zone 1, zone 2 stuff as I did last year. My base was huge, so I did adapt very quickly. I think I've
Yeah.
always made those caveats in my posts. I'm like, I adapted quickly because I literally was running 50 to 70 miles a week for like most of last year. Like
Yeah.
that's a big difference than if you're running from 0 and you increase your intensity a lot. Like
Yeah.
that, you're gonna have a different, right? Like it's a lot easier to build fitness on fitness than it is to like
Yeah. Yeah.
build fitness on no foundation, right? But
Yeah.
I'm bringing that back up because I need more miles for the goals that I have, right? Kind of thing. But that's a strategic, intentional, like, hey, more volume is needed for this versus like, I'm still getting better and fitter and faster for what I'm doing here, but I am adapting to my speed work. And I know, okay, to some degree, like, volume is going to be the thing I need to be able to handle longer runs and more miles and those bigger things. Let's
Hmm.
bring that up. And, I say that because I know people are going to be like, but what if I need more volume for the goals that I have? And it's not like you can't bring that up or go higher. You just have to be intentional about like exactly what you're saying here. Like I did the same speed session I'll do the same speed session sometimes weeks in a row. And people, I
Yeah.
think, for some reason in the running community have this idea that you need to alter your speed workouts every single week and change it up and alter it. And like, yes,
See,
there's
and
validity to VO2 max, tempo, threshold, like all that work, like having a pace range. But like, if the same workout's working,
yeah.
keep
And
doing it.
also, like, how do you know you're actually improving your performance unless you're repeating the same workout week in week, like, like for say 3-4 weeks in a row? Like, you don't know if you're going from like a VO2 max workout to a threshold workout to a marathon paced workout, like one week to the other. Like, you're not doing yourself any good, in the ability to actually track your progress. So you're just like, yeah, I think it works, but you don't know. Like, you don't know if that's actually working or not. And that's again, I think a lot of people just kind of haphazardly throw things against the wall, hoping that it's going to be like the magic workout or whatever it is. And I want to go back to, there. So something that we're really, really bad at in terms of like being us as runners talking about is the difference between volume, intensity, and training load, where volume is just like how much time, how much distance did you run? It takes
Mhm.
it doesn't take any intensity into account. So, for example, you could be running, 40 miles a week, but if your intensity is actually really high, if you're running like zone 3, zone 4, then your total training load is actually really high. Whereas, it, and then you can play with it, right? You can say, oh, well, my goal now is to actually increase because I want to run a 100-mile race. So I need to increase my volume. Well, you got to dial back that intensity quite a bit in order to make sure your training load is progressing slowly. And, there's like the rules of thumb of like, oh, 10% per week or like whatever it is. It's like, no, be more conservative. Do like 10% every 3 weeks or, 5%, like something along those lines. It's always err on the side of easier, because easier is going to lead to more consistency, and more consistency is going to lead to better progression over time.
That area
And
under
that,
the curve, that's such a science term, but like
yeah,
I cannot stress enough to people, runners, that time, that area under the curve time, not the linear increase time, but the like, hey, I'm kind of hanging out at the same maybe 5 to 10 mileage range, but I'm
hmm
doing it over and over and over and over again. And especially if it's a little bit higher, right? And when I say higher, I deal with a lot of Gen Pop people who like they want to run 5, 10, 15 miles a week and then they're frustrated they're not making progress. I'm like, you're probably going to have to do more versus someone who's running
yeah,
60 miles a week. Maybe you don't need to go to 90 to get better, right? Like there's
yeah.
that nuance of like, everyone's like more isn't better. And I'm like, for some of you, more might be
It's
better,
it's
right?
the it's the
Yeah.
incremental gains, right?
Yes.
On the
Yes.
early side of the curve, you stand to make a lot more for small increases. Whereas, once you get up to, it's hard to say a range, but like, 40, 50, 60 miles, like going up from 60 to 100, to 90 is going to be such a small amount where you could be like, well, could I put that a little bit more intentionally, like
Yeah.
if you're a 5K runner, like let's do some mile repeats, for
Yeah.
example, at that point, like, and
Yes.
then really hone in on that 5K speed.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's again, it's
I
nuanced
always have
conversation.
that
That's hard.
caveat disclaimer of like people like more isn't better. I'm like, well, more isn't better if you're comparing a regular sub elite to elite athlete, maybe, but like volume, but like more is probably better if you're running 10 miles a week and you start running build up to 30 to 40, you're probably
Yeah.
going to see very significant increases in fitness. And
Yes.
that's my like caveat here. But I think for like your general regular person, like I think that like if you can just spend some time hanging out in that like 30 to 40 mile a week range for an extended period of time, that's not so much that 40, 50, 60 starts to become really, really, really time demanding. And I know a lot of people are busy on schedules. And so like I'm
Mhm.
giving this like this is just an example of like the kind of person I see a lot, right? Versus like I know you work with people who are maybe the more the me's or the you's who are like, yeah, no, I'll run 8 hours a week. That's fine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But like I see so much success, or even like the 20 to 30 range, if they go up to that for a little bit, or 30 to 40, like whatever that is, and just spend like a consistent amount of time there building fitness, not trying to train for a race, not trying to peak, not trying
Mhm.
to push their fitness, but just like refining and becoming better runners and then mixing in quality stuff. People think when I say this and I'm like, you must run zone 2 only for everything and never do anything hard and intense. No, but like you're having that in there in a way that's recoverable and adaptable and just giving
Mhm.
yourself time to just work on getting fitter. Not
Yeah.
I'm rushing to this half marathon in 8 weeks. Not I have a 5K in 4 weeks and I need to be ready for like, or spending that period of time. If you do have like some sort of training history base, like you were saying, is like, hey, do I need to like work on quality? Should I work on getting faster in a distance that's shorter or that I'm not
Yeah.
good at or whatever it looks like in during that time? And that's where I like, you know, there is a time and a place for intentionally increasing that. But I like the note that you made about like that training load, because that's something that I don't think people think about enough, especially
Mhm.
where I'm like, hey, let's not increase volume and intensity at the same time and really rapidly. That's probably going to backfire. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that, especially people who I don't know if you see this as much as I do. Is like, they'll say someone ran a half marathon last fall, but they decided to not run all week winter, and then they want to train for a half this spring or summer. They want to jump back into what they were doing last year, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you can't
No,
do
no,
that.
no.
Your body
Yeah.
and fitness
You're not
aren't
the
the
same
same.
human.
Yeah, it's not the same as it was last year, and you have to regress, right? And it's usually bringing back that training load, and it's a lot easier to keep it low intense to get that volume up when you're first doing it because
Mhm.
that's easier to handle, right? Than just like 3 hit workouts a week. Like,
Yeah.
send it right off the bat, right? And there's
It
obviously nuance here with that, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, where it's like, hey, you're not the same person and you can't just jump back to that speed workout volume on top of that volume you're doing all at once. You're just not adapted to it.
Yeah. Yeah, the best approach I think, for that type of person, if they really wanna add, some sort of high intensity stuff, because like I in the base phase, I like to have, probably some level of VO2 max development, if they are, training for something that's like half marathon, marathon above, because most of the time, like once you get to that specific phase, you're not gonna be training your VO2 max. So we need to
Yeah.
improve that. Um just add one VO2 max workout and you could do it on the bike, the elliptical, like anything that is just like unloaded, but allows you to still work on those physiological adaptations. Like that's the way that my brain works is like, okay, well, early in the season, it's about developing your physiology. And then later in the season, it's about developing your race specific
Yeah.
adaptations that you need. So like race
Yeah.
pace and like those sort of things.
No, I
Um,
completely agree with that.
yeah.
I like it too during that phase for people who need to get better at running faster. I love doing like during that time if they haven't been doing it running at all, just like fartlicky, like 1, 2, or 3 minute like pushes
Mm,
and floats
hmm.
in between. I really like doing that with like my, especially again, I'm more Gen Pop regular people and they like aren't used to running faster during runs really at all. And I'm like, hey, let's like
Yeah.
sprinkle in some of these like 1 to 3 minute pickups with like float or run recoveries. You're not like, you know what I mean? Like instead of the VO2
Yeah.
max, like all out stuff, it's like, hey, let's actually
Yeah.
just like practice like running faster and harder so you can get used to it. And it's so funny because I think a lot of people, they think they're running hard when they're running hard because their heart rate's higher because they're just not adapted to the aerobic stuff. And I was like, but
Mhm.
that's different than the skill of running harder, right? When you're
Yeah,
thinking about
yeah.
just pace, like the effort and the pace that you're doing, regardless of your physiology. Like if you're not used to doing that, like you have to kind of adapt. It's almost like I get a lot of people who come from lifting backgrounds. So I always like to
Mhm.
compare it to like you do high volume lifting phases with lots of reps, like 3 by 10, but then you have your like refining phases of your strength work of like you're doing
Mhm.
80% or higher and you're working on that thing. And I like to think about that as like almost like you're transitioning from that. Like you're not going to go straight from only doing high reps to just doing 1 rep max over the day,
Right,
but you're
right.
going to have to work your way towards that in a way that's comfortable, right? So yeah, I like that too. If I could get more people though to like spend their off season specifically doing VO2 max specific training cycles that are like, hey, let's get it faster, like a 5K type
Yeah.
effort training block or even our 1 or 2 miles per time. my job would be a lot easier. But a lot of
Yeah.
times it's like, hey, I've been running it all for 6 months. I'm like, okay, let's start with 1 minute of pickups like,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get you there, like
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And to be really clear here, like,
Yeah.
I don't recommend for people to do, like, especially if they're coming off of nothing, to do really any of their running volume hard, because I think that, it's like, it's the way I visualize it is, it's like as you move up in intensity, especially with running, the fatigue accumulation is just absolutely insane. And then you run the risk of like getting injured. Whereas if you do some level of interval, sort of stuff like on a bike, you
Mhm,
can go pretty hard and you're probably going to feel tired in your legs, but you
mhm.
don't run the risk of like the overuse, like pounding
Yes.
injuries like we talked about.
Yes. No,
Um,
I completely agree with that, and I think I'll just add here for people listening too, because I know we're kinda just, like, chatting shop right now, is that, um, the biggest thing, running has such a higher central nervous system fatigue
yes.
than the cycling or the elliptical or the row or even whatever you're doing. And it's obviously pounding on your tissues and your connective tissues. That adaptation of your connective tissues mixed with the central nervous system fatigue of running is what usually leads to either injuries or that excessive fatigue that carries out into your training. But you can
Yeah.
handle that on cross training type modalities, and especially a bike. Like anyone could really come off the street and do a harder effort push on a bike, and you're
Yeah.
not really risking a lot of any issues with that whatsoever. Um, so that's, I think that is really good advice for people who want that threshold and intensity. I think people think it's like below them to do the bike for intervals or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But just because it's not running doesn't mean it's not beneficial, right? Eventually, you're going to
Yeah.
have to run fast to get faster at running. That is a skill that you're going to have to practice.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll tell people that a lot. Like I have optional days in my programs, and I'll tell people to either use them for cross training on zone 2 if they can't stay in zone 2 while running, like on a bike,
Mm-hmm.
or we have like hit and sprint interval training on demand workouts in our library. I'm like, or like
Nice.
swap it for one of those if you want the intensity, but you can't handle it with the running yet. And I think a lot of people are like, but isn't the bike like, but I'm trying to run. And I'm like, yeah, but it's giving you the physiological stimulus that you need right now that you
Yeah.
can't get through running because you're not able to, or it's too much for you at this point in time. And we were talking before we started, and I'll add for the listeners here is like when I was coming back from my Achilles injury, I did air bike intervals for all of
Yep.
my high intensity stuff. And the air bike,
Yeah.
I'm swear to God, the air bike, I think, is the most effective cross training tool for getting faster. I have no data to back this
That's like
other than,
you're talking about like the
yeah, like
Aerodyne or
the
an Echo
Echo
Bike or
bike, the
something.
air bike. I swear to God, when I would, in between ultra seasons in my PhD, I do CrossFit over the winter. I'd focus more on strength training. I do more CrossFit. I'd still run like 2 or 3 days a week, like a long run, shorter run. And then usually Metcons had running in them. So it's not like I wasn't running at all, but like I wasn't like running mainly. But I swear to God, I would always pick the bike, the air bike for my anything cardio in my CrossFit workouts. And I was some of the fastest running I've ever been. I remember coming off those winters from doing hard air bike intervals. Again, this is like completely anecdotal, but I'm
Yeah.
like, I think because you get such a high for like a cross training cardio equipment, the air bike, because it's arms and legs. I think you just get a
Yep.
higher overall physiological response because it's more full body. But I swear to God, if you're going to cross train with anything, again, purely anecdotal, but like
Yeah.
I have never experienced that because I've been doing rowing and concept 2 biking a lot with my high rocks training for extra volume for cardio during the week. Um, but there's something about that air bike that just really gets you. Like,
I think it's the combination of like, especially like the Echo Bike, which like it requires almost like lower cadence sort of work. So it's like it's kind of best of all worlds in terms of, well, you're getting that like strength endurance, side of
mhm,
things, which we don't really touch on when we're running very much. And then you're also, it's just the whole body sort of drive that you're not getting just purely from a bike.
yeah,
And so that, I mean, it makes sense to me.
yeah.
I would obviously, it's like before we start making any sweeping scientific statements,
No, this
we
is
would need
purely
somebody to go do
anecdotal.
it.
This is purely anecdotal. But I mean, like we did like some VO2 max protocol creation at my PhD on the rower and the air bike. And you get higher VO2s on the air bike than you do
Yeah.
the rower, right? And the rower is more full
Yeah.
body, but like you get lower on bike than you do running, right? Like it's not like this is like totally off basis for, unless you're obviously adapted in training. But yeah, I think that that's
Yeah.
a really incredible tool. And it's really painful too. So if you really like the
Yes.
hard, high intense and the suck, you get everything that you're looking for.
Yeah. Don't try to do zone 2 on an air bike because you can't really.
You literally can't. If you
Yeah.
sit on it and look at it, my heart rate gets to 135.
Yeah, heart rate's already above zone 2 because of the anxiety.
Yeah.
Well, it's like this has been like an awesome, early conversation just about like, shop
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
and program
Sorry for all
design
the
and stuff.
shop talk. We can get into your
No,
questions here.
no, not at all. Like these are the types of conversations like my audience I think loves. But what we really like, why I really, wanted Alyssa to come on the podcast was to talk about hybrid training. So
Yeah.
my first question is can you just define hybrid training and then also define for me, what is the difference between a hybrid athlete and a runner who does strength training?
Yes. Okay. Actually, I have like my whole spiel on what I really like describe as hybrid training. So there's two
Okay.
types of training. There's hybrid training and concurrent training. Concurrent training is what
Ah,
hybrid training is called in the scientific literature. And concurrent training is when you're trying to combine two or more modes of training in the same day, week, or block or month for most of you of training or training cycles. Athletes of all types do concurrent training. This is why it's studied in the research, because how do you maximize performance? Because they need conditioning and they need strength. Strength and conditioning is a
mhm.
field that exists long before hybrid training exists. People love to say it's not hybrid training, it's just strength and conditioning. I'm like, okay, but that's the caveat of like, so runners who lift fall into the bucket of concurrent training. You are using
Mhm.
strength specifically as a tool to complement your running performance, but you don't care about strength as a primary outcome of your
Yep.
performance. Now, that does not mean that you shouldn't try to get stronger or lift more weight or do more in the gym. That's just good programming, that's good training, but like you don't care about your performance metrics there. You're just doing it as specifically to complement or substitute things that you cannot get from your running training or my thing, because runners hate to lift, you're going to age and you need health and you need to lift in order to do that, right? Like
Yeah, you
runners
need
always
some
are like,
muscle.
I have people that would be like, well, you just need to run, and running uphill and hard is the same as strength training. I'm like, it's not. You're going to age and that's going to backfire. So, like,
Mhm.
that's terrible advice, especially unless you're like in the 99th percentile and your career is on the line. And guess what? Those people are strength training. So, like,
Yeah.
Nolan Blunt point. But then there's hybrid training. And
Mhm.
I like to think of hybrid training as you are intentionally trying to refine and maximize two components or more of your training simultaneous at one point in time. And there's a spectrum of hybrid training. So the one end is like purely runner, endurance, triathlete, aerobic, swimmer, whatever you are, purely endurance. Your goal is 100% to become a better endurance athlete, whatever it is. Then you have the step in. You're like endurance athlete who still does lifting and training, but you're not quite in the middle where you're trying to maximize both. The middle is that maximization of both. Next to that
Mhm.
is like the weightlifter who does enough cardio to not die of cardiovascular disease. And then you
Yeah.
have like pure weight trainer, power lifter, bro, literally will not do cardio other than their heart rate increases from everything because they're so deconditioned, right?
Yep.
And so hybrid training is like trying to maximize this. So you're probably not going to be your 100% best runner than if you spent all of your time, energy, and resources being a runner. Same thing with lifting. But the idea is to maximize these simultaneously in your training at one time, right?
Mhm.
But the problem with hybrid training that a lot of people mistake is then they want to do 100% of both at the same point in time. And that is
Right.
not how you hybrid train. You can't hybrid train by doing 100% of both at every point in time. It is a different approach to training because you're trying to maximize two characteristics simultaneously. And so
Mhm.
you're not going to be at 100% of each of those, but this is where people get confused. They're like, well, I wasn't my strongest when I was hybrid training. And I'm like, yeah, neither am I, but I am stronger on average now while hybrid training than most people. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Or I am stronger now at the same relative volume of endurance or faster at this relative volume of endurance than I was a few years ago. And that's because hybrid training is about like increasing your deficits essentially in your training over
Mhm.
time. It's a lot more long game, slow approach. I like to take seasons of training in order to refine different characteristics, improve, maintain all those things. But the goal is long term. You're trying to improve and refine both. So you're not having periods of time where, oh, I'm only running, oh, I'm only lifting. You're always doing both, but
Yeah.
you're adjusting that balance and distribution of that over time in order to, again, maximize both. So I don't care, honestly, though. A lot of people in the industry right now get really mad at people who say they're hybrid training and they're not really hybrid training. Let people just have whatever if they want to feel like, I don't give a heck. And honestly, like I use it because people resonate with it. It is
Mhm.
gimmicky and markety right now, but like people understand what that means. And hybrid training is health training. It is, if you think about the data that is like the best training for body composition, longevity,
Mm-hmm.
health, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, aging, menopause, whatever you want, keyword of the day that we want to think about that's trendy right now. Guess what? Hybrid training is the best way to train
Yeah.
for that.
Yep.
And whether you fall a little bit outside the spectrum to you lift a little bit more or you run a little bit more and you want to I don't care. Let people have the
Yeah.
words that they identify with what they're doing that makes them feel good and engage in participation.
I
Is
I
everyone
I really
maximizing
hate
it? No.
Yeah, I really hate when people like get so kind of caught up in the definition of something that they immediately like discount a lot of people who are saying it. Like it's really gatekeeper-ish, right? It's like, "Oh, well, because you're not running 6 days a week, you're not technically a runner." You're like, "No, like get out
Let
of
people
here."
have what they want. It's
Yeah.
harmless. Let people feel if they makes them motivated to strength train and do endurance and cardio because they
Yeah.
feel like they're a hybrid athlete. Yeah, the reels are hilarious making fun of hybrid athletes. I'm not saying we can't laugh at ourselves. You
Yeah.
absolutely can, right? Just like I'm gonna laugh at the reels that say trail runners are just bad runners who like made a sport out of being bad runners, right?
I've
Like that's
I've never heard that, but
Oh,
that's yeah.
it's hilarious. It's true. Like
Yeah.
we're terrible. We're technically not good runners, but we're on trails, so it's like power hiking is just
Yeah.
walking in the woods.
Yeah.
Like we made a hell of a sport out of being mediocre, right?
Yeah.
But like let people have the thing they want, right? Kind of
Mhm.
thing. And so yeah, there's differences of that. But I like my slogan for my company though is called hybrid on your terms. And the reason we made it that is because like there's this idea that hybrid training is one size fits all, and it's not. It's a lot more complicated because people have two different fitness levels at one point in time coming into the same program, right?
Mhm.
You have your aerobic or cardiovascular fitness and you have your strength fitness. And then hybrid training is like can you handle like the like kind of like the combined work capacity of both of those? Like that I have this pyramid and it's like your general aerobic and cardio base. Like, what do you have here on this side of the pyramid? And the other side of the pyramid is just your general strength, skill, and exposure. Like, we've
Mhm.
all seen the people who have a fantastic cardio base, but they look like a baby deer fresh out of birth when they go into a gym. They have
Yeah.
no neuromuscular connection with their body. If they try to jump or hop, it's like, oh my gosh, you're gonna break yourself. Like, hang on,
You're
let's
gonna break
regress.
yourself in half. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's just like they look like the tube balloons outside of a car dealership because they haven't trained that characteristic. This isn't me saying you guys are terrible. It's just like it's funny, right? But on the flip side, we have the power lifter who's a super strong, efficient, powerful, but then like they literally sit on a bike and their heart rate is 180 beats per minute, right?
Right,
Like it's the
right.
same thing. Like they get winded walking up the steps, right? Kind of thing, which everyone does. But you know what I'm saying. So like
Yeah.
we have these two things. And unless you have a base of both, you're not going to be able to hybrid train. So you need to work on the thing you suck at.
Yeah.
That's the part that people hate because cyber training is constantly improving the thing you suck at. So you're better at everything all at once is kind of the goal. And
Mhm.
then from there, you work up on each of those and it's like, well, how much running endurance cardio volume can you handle, right? Not only do we have the generic base of being able to just do it, but like, okay, let's build up our volume, maybe some intensity. What can you handle? Like that overall work capacity of that. And then same thing for strength. Like there's a difference between just having the general exposure and skills of strength, but can you actually handle like some volume and intensity in your training. And then as we
Mhm.
get up it's like, okay, glycolytic capacity, like that muscular endurance, like the CrossFit, high rocks, doing both at once in the same point in time. It's a
Mhm.
lot easier to do those things if you have aerobic capacity and you have strength capacity. It is
Yep.
so much easier to do a Metcon or a high rocks race when you have, like, it's not that it's impossible, but if you want to maximize both at the same time during that, like then you need all of that base to do that. And then that's hybrid training is then it's like, okay, I have a good base of strength. I have a good base of this. I'm going to spend periods of time getting better at specific deficits or going through
Mhm.
training cycles on specific goals. Or maybe then you're handling a higher volume both at the same period of time and maximizing that all together. But that is so different than like, I'm just a runner who cares about running, but I need to get better at strength to complement and improve that. You're going to steal
Yeah.
some of those same training characteristics. I do think a lot of runners would benefit from a strength season, like a period of time
Oh,
where you stop doing high volume training, you
yeah.
pull it down by 30%, and you actually try to get stronger and gain muscle. And the people don't realize like once you're strong and gain muscle, it is so much easier to maintain that with less
Yep.
stress, less volume, maintaining intensity.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the same for if you've developed your VO2 max. Like, so if you have like a season of VO2 max development, once you've developed that, like there was a study that came out about it was like elite level soccer players, and they had done a bunch of like 2 or 3 VO2 max workouts per week in the off season, and then they switched to one VO2 max workout, and they were able to maintain their VO2 max for like 3 months or something along those lines, was just one workout after that. So they essentially cut it down by 66%. And it's the same thing with strength training. Is like once you establish the movement patterns, the neuromuscular connection, just like all of those aspects of strength, then you can maintain it for a long time by reducing the volume. And it's interesting because hybrid training is essentially it's biathlon. Essentially you're training for two separate things, but you need to dial up,
Mhm.
the EQ on everything in different,
Yes.
in different ways, over the course of time. So like, for example, like off season in the winter would be a perfect time for endurance athletes to do a strength training specific thing. Because now you're
Mhm.
focusing on something else. You should be reducing your volume because you're in the off season anyways. So you can still maintain some level of fitness by doing, by just maintaining some small amount of volume plus maybe one hard workout per week. But your main focus is the strength stuff. So here's a follow-up question to that. This is probably a common myth that's probably still perpetuated, but this idea that like, oh, well, if you're doing endurance work, you're activating things like AMPK and other inhibitory pathways to protein synthesis. So isn't cardio just going to kill your strength gains?
Yeah. So we have this come up a lot, right?
Yeah.
And to some degree, maybe a little bit, but the magnitude of which this is going on in your body, it's like signaling soup. People think it's like an on off switch and it's like signaling soup.
Yeah.
But like
Yep.
when you think about endurance training is specifically stimulating an energy deficit in your muscles. That's
Yep.
part of the stimulus pathway of endurance training that leads to adaptation in your body. It is necessary, it's required, it's part of it. Similarly, but opposite, strength training and hypertrophy training is signaling for your body to repair and build up back muscle training. So it seems like they're opposing. And there's this idea that the interference effect, that these pathways inhibit each other. And to some degree, it kind of does, but it's not like people think it's an on-off switch, and it's
Mm-hmm.
more probably like a dial. And
A
that
dimmer switch. Yeah.
a dimmer switch, right? And we do see in some studies of concurrent training, like running more than cycling, for example, it will reduce some of the magnitude of gains in muscle strength or hypertrophy, but it doesn't blunt them. Like that's the key.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the layman's communication in the fitness industry is that this kills gains, and it's no, it's maybe slightly reduced compared to what it would be if you were 100% in on it, but
Right.
it's reduced, not stopped. So it's still, people still make strength and or muscle gains. And it appears that I think that endurance training interferes with strength and maximal power output because of the central nervous system fatigue far more than hypertrophy, right? That moderate
Yeah.
to lower intensity work. Like the biggest thing is nutrition in recovery and
Yeah.
sleep. Like actually nutrition, the status, how much you're eating probably matters more than any of that. If like I'm
Mm-hmm.
being honest, I think nutrition is the biggest driver here because you can out eat the killing of your gains, right? Like
Right. Right.
that's for the most part, like that's what it's going to come down to is can you eat in a way that's appropriate that you can recover? And then the same thing for runners who are afraid of getting huge and bulky. I'm like, well, you can still
Good
lift
luck.
hard and heavy and not eat like a unfiltered power lifter, and you're not going to blow up into like being 200 pounds more than you are in a week of touching
And
a weights. Like it's
and if
similar but different.
yeah, if anything too, like, a lot of endurance athletes, at least the ones that I've worked with, have a tendency to undereat and
Oh, 100%.
overtrain. So
100%.
it's like, so first of all, yeah, if you're not even eating adequate calories to like build extra muscle, you're not going to get bigger. And if anything, just by eating more and having more calories on board, you're actually going to feel better for your endurance work and your strength work at the same
And you're
time.
gonna
So then your
perform
gains are
better,
going to
and
be,
you're gonna have better power
yeah,
output, and your hormones will be
yeah.
better, and, like, it's better to be fed and fast than thin and frail, right? Like,
Well, and
that's such a it's such an endurance thing, right?
yes, it's really tough because I was actually I was 172 pounds when I was doing, like all of my VO2 max work, and my VO2 max was like probably like mid 70s. And then I got I've been doing this like weekly blood test thing, and it was like, "Oh, your cholesterol's high, so you probably need to reduce the amount of food you're eating." So I was like, "Oh shit, I probably need to reduce the amount of food." So I did lost some weight, but then definitely noticed that the top end, sort of gearing is lower
Well,
because
people don't also know that elevated cholesterol is sometimes a response to undernutrition. Like, that's a
Right.
thing
And
that gets overlooked a lot in the endurance
yes.
community is that you can have sometimes, like that happens a lot with women with low energy availability. Their dietitian
Yep.
or doctor will be like, "Oh, you need to exercise more and eat less," and it's actually like a non-intuitive response to being underfed, right?
Yes.
And and
Yes.
and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, I know we probably don't have time to get to the female phys stuff today, but that's fine because I'll
Yeah.
give you the synopsis. Women don't need to train different than men. You might need to alter zones in the luteal phase, hydrate, take more salt, but the energy availability sensitivity is greater and you
Yes.
need to be fed. You need to eat a lot. You're so much more sensitive to that, especially carbohydrates.
Yep.
Especially carbohydrates. That's my women's synopsis. If I could bottle it down into like 3 seconds, that's all you really need to know. It's like
No.
women need to eat more than they think they do, right? Like
Yes.
even me, I'm increasing my training volume right now, and I'm a pretty good eater. I'm a pretty good eater. And I was like not recovering super great. I use my Whoop, I track my calories, but I'm not dogmatic about it. I use
Yeah.
everything as objective data and feedback. And if I see trends and I'm like, okay, something, let's figure out what's going on here with that, right? And I thought I was eating enough because I'm a good eater, but I was like, well, my sleep's really good. My training performance wasn't really dropping, even though I was increasing volume. So I was like, I don't think it's like too much volume. And I was like, okay, like maybe I'm a little overworked right now. We'll pull that back a little bit. But then I was like, the only other thing that makes sense is that I just need to eat more, even though I was eating
Mhm.
more and I felt like I was. And then you know what happened? Oh, wow. Guess what? Feeling a lot better. I made my easier
Mhm.
runs a lot easier. I just pulled them down in intensity a little bit because I think that does help too, right? When you're increasing that stuff. But last week I drank a liquid IV and I ate a bowl of cereal and I felt like a new person. And I was like, oh, that's how I know. Even though I was crushing it, I thought I was eating enough, but I was like,
Mhm.
we just need more than we think we are. And like, this is someone who I'm eating like 2,600 calories a day to begin with, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not under eating by any means, but it's like, oh, maybe I need 27, 28, right? To feel
Yeah.
a little bit better. But women are so afraid of those numbers. When I tell people that
Yeah.
I eat like 26, 28, 3,000 calories a day on long run days, and when I'm training for things, I eat upwards to 4,000 calories a day. And people
Yeah.
are terrified by that thought. And I'm pretty weight stable. If anything, I lose weight when I'm training for big races and events comparatively to like my meat cake powerlifting type build that I have in the off season, which I'm fine with. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I gained some weight. The world didn't end. But people also don't take that approach to their training. We're like, well, maybe I need a period of time where my body needs to gain weight to recover from like a marathon or
Yeah.
my 100 miler. Like I was hungry for a month after I finished that. And I just let myself eat. I just let myself eat. I gained a few pounds and I was like, it's my body was sincerely hungry. I was eating healthy food. I was like, we're just
Yeah.
recovering from a massive stressor. Like, but people don't
Mhm.
give their bodies either off seasons or the nutrition or periods of time to recover from those things. But yeah, nutrition is like, I mean, 90% of things that it comes to hybrid training are fixed by nutrition and appropriate training volume.
Yeah.
Like that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that, and that's like, like, that's my approach is, like, anybody who comes to me who has been overtraining or, just feels bad, I'm like, "Okay, well, how's your sleep and how's your nutrition?" First and foremost. And then we look at your training, and most of the time, it's like they're doing too much training, they're not sleeping adequately, and their nutrition is kinda
Well,
suffering from that. And your nutrition and what you're putting into your body is actually tied to how well you sleep. How well you sleep is tied to how well you can recover, and you can only get better if you're recovering enough for the
yeah.
training volume that you're actually
And
doing.
that's hard for some people because I have clients sometimes and their volume that they're training at doesn't seem inappropriate at all. And that's when I'm like, okay, something else. Some
Yeah.
people, I'm like, yeah, you're doing the hardest volume lifting program while trying to train for a marathon and add on metcons. You're probably doing too much. You shouldn't be doing that. Let's pull it back. There is those
Yeah.
cases where like, no, like, yeah, let's pull it back. Or like, hey, let's bring back our intensity on our easy runs even easier. Like that's an easy
Mhm.
place to pull back, right? You can like, that's fine. But yeah, sometimes it's like, oh, I don't think people realize like, and I can track this directly. If I under eat carbohydrate, it's so funny. Like I don't live and die by my Whoop, but my HRV will tank purely directionally related to my carb intake. Like that's something I
Mm.
noticed when training for a 50 miler a few years ago. Like I was like, that's interesting. And it was just like a weird observation that I made. And that could just be me, right? But I think it's because the more fed I was, the better I slept. And the better I slept, that more improved my recovery. And so it was a weird trend I noticed. I was like, oh, my carb intake is directly influencing this. But I think it was exactly that. I was eating enough carbs, I was sleeping better, and then I was
Mhm.
recovering better, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't Yeah, and it's hard because everything kind of follows the one of the other. And the sleep thing is hardest for people. I know a lot of athletes
Yeah.
are so resistant to eating more, but we're everyday people, so it's harder to it's everyone says, "Well, I can't sleep more." Right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, can we get in even 30 more minutes?" Right? Like it doesn't need to be 2 hours, but can you even get in 30 more minutes of like
Yeah.
winding down, putting your phone away, like stop doom scrolling, turn off the Netflix, like
I was gonna say that it's like maybe it's not about getting more sleep, it's getting a better sleep. And
yeah.
it starts with, like, well, if you're on your phone or watching your TV until 5 minutes before you go to bed, then it takes you another hour, like your brain needs time to actually like unwind and unravel everything in the day. And I've
Yeah.
had I you like I've been trying to like compare this with myself is like if I'm on my phone, looking at YouTube shorts, like, even up to like 30 minutes before I go to bed, or if I check my email or Instagram or something like that, it almost always takes me longer to fall asleep. And it feels like my brain just never shuts off sometimes.
I
Whereas
go ahead.
if
No,
I
sorry.
have that like 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 that kind of like, okay, dial it back, put your phone away, like then I feel like, it's like, well, I fell asleep, my headphones die about halfway through the night, and then I wake up and I'm just like like groggy and stuff like that. So I take my headphones out, put those, and then I fall back asleep. So it's a huge difference in terms of like the brain actually being able to shut off. So that's what
No.
I try to work with people. Is like
It's
I'm not expecting you to get more sleep. I just
yeah.
want you to get better sleep.
No, and I'm a workaholic and I will work up until 8, 8:30, sometimes 9, and I shouldn't. And I know that. And I can directly tell if I'm either on social media or working late, my sleep quality is lower.
Hmm.
I even without a wearable or anything, I can feel it. My onset to sleep, my quality of sleep, the chances that I wake up in the middle of the night with my brain spiraling, like which then keeps me up in the middle of the night, like all of those are increased by that. I use the Opal app. Um, Opal, I use Opius for YouTube clips. I use the Opal app to block my phone from like 7 or 7:30 p.m. until like 8:30 the next day so that I'm not on my
Hmm.
phone right before I go to bed or when I wake up. But I also have an alarm on my phone now, especially as I'm increasing training volume because work stress competes with my recovery and all of that. So I have to be
Hmm.
more cognizant of that. And I know that, right? This winter I could get away with working a little bit more because I was only training like 6 hours a week. So I was like, oh, you have time to like kind of delve into your workaholic ways. And I can't get away with that anymore. And I literally have an alarm every night at 7:30 that says stop working and then 8:30 that says go upstairs. So that way if I
Hmm.
am on my phone or I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, it's like, here's your cue, go. Like
Yep.
stop doing this, go. And I'll try to read before bed too. I know people like, they're like, "Oh no, I want to watch TV, blah blah blah." And sometimes I do, but reading before bed helps a lot.
Yes.
I do use like the red light, night light at night, things like this. And I know this isn't me like breaking down the science of hybrid training, but guys, I'm telling you, like for strength or endurance or hybrid and all this stuff, like these are the little things that are unsexy, that are
Yeah.
lifestyle choices that actually really make big impacts. Like I wasn't recovering super great with my spike in training volume the last few weeks, which is a latent adaptation. I'm not worried about it. I felt fine, but I really was like, okay, besides the food thing, I was like, work. I was working a lot. I was working too late. I wasn't stressed, but I was excited. But stress and excitement and hyperdrive are still kind of similar in our bodies. And I was like, okay,
Right.
listen, we need to like maybe cool it a little bit on this. Like maybe we're not working till 9 p.m. for these few weeks. Like let's maybe stop that. Like that's not a good
Hmm.
thing. And having to, because I think it's so easy for us to be like, oh, I'll do more in training, but we're so unwilling to do the more and the things that
Hmm.
allow us to do the more in the training, right? Like that's the hard thing, right? Especially most people are not, their jobs aren't to work out. Like their
Yep.
jobs aren't just to train. Like you're either have kids or a 9 to 5 or responsibilities, right? Like I'm unloading my dishwasher, you know what I mean? Like, and doing my laundry 20,000 times a week so I can train as much as I do. It's not like my
Hmm.
job is, and then I'm working on top of it. Like, it's not like my job is only to take care of myself and work out,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
there's
Yeah,
other,
you're not a professional athlete who has all that stuff tailored. And,
yeah, you're just
that's
not.
yeah. So you need to become more optimal with the things that actually matter. It's not like and this is, this world of hyper optimization, right? It's like, "Oh, well, you need to do these 26 things as soon as you wake up." It's like, well, if you just woke up and drank water and weren't on your phone for the first hour of your day, you'd probably, gain 99% of those benefits. Or like if you turned off your phone and didn't have a TV in your bedroom, you know, an hour or 2 hours before bed, and I have like Himalayan, salt lamps, and then I
That's
wear like
exactly
a
what I
little,
have in my room.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're great. Like, because then it brings the ambiance, like down, you don't have those like crazy bright lights. And then I use a headlamp with a red light on it to read my book.
Oh, I have a
So,
red light. I have a red light like night light or for like
okay,
reading
yeah,
light
yeah,
that I
yeah.
use. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. And if I can't sleep, I read because you're not like I feel like it reduces like that stimulation for me. And like our jobs are being online, so I think maybe I have more of stress tied to being on my phone and being online than like a lot of people. It's hard. Like
Yeah.
I can't be on social media at night without also like being at work, right? So for
Yep.
me, that's also like a big thing. But like also like that same thing applies for you guys, like your Microsoft Outlook and your, you know what I mean, your Teams and your Slack. Like I
Yes.
like block those, hide that, don't check
Yep.
that. Get that's so hard for me, but that's been huge for me. Or knowing for me, like too, like I'm like, how do I work best with my training and my working out, right? In my schedule in life. And I obviously have a lot more freedom and flexibility around my days, but I'm like, I do a lot better if I get up in the morning and I kind of start working sooner than later, but I don't,
Hmm.
I try to not check my apps and my social media and my email. Like I try to get like the things that I need to get done. And I end my workday early so I can train and then have time to wind down. But in
Hmm.
different seasons of life, that when I was in my postdoc, I was going to work at 6 a.m., going to the gym, going back to work. Like you just have to figure out like, how can I fit in these little things that make sense for like the season that I'm in my
Yep.
life kind of thing and like make that work for you and building that into your work instead of like, we're, just doing more, right? Because you're probably, especially people who are endurance athletes, you're already inclined to this perfectionism, overdoing things. Like my friend Karen, who'd be a great person to interview too, she's a PhD in health behavior, is
Hmm.
like, what are you deprioritizing in order to prioritize these other things, right? Like,
Yeah.
where are you pulling back so you can do more? Kind of thing.
Hmm.
And that I think is where people they're like, how can I do more, 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 more? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a 17-step morning routine because I literally don't have the bandwidth for it, but I can
No.
block social media and take my dog for a walk. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, and not do anything else until I've done that.
Hmm. Sometimes getting more out of like life, out of your training, is to learn where to dial it back and where to simplify. I think that's really, I've been seeing a lot of really good posts from Steve Magnus about this sort of stuff.
I
Um,
think Steve and Brad, who he's collaborated with on a lot of books, they do a good job at
yeah,
like capturing that. It's like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
no, yeah. So go check them out too, because they provide, they're like, oh well, like the best elite level athletes, they're doing the things where they're eliminating the most amount of decisions that they have to make in their life. So if you're always, I mean, this ties back into the beginning of our conversation, and we'll just wrap it up. Is,
Yeah.
if like elite level athletes and elite level performers are always looking for ways of trying to simplify things. So if you're always looking for that new novel workout, as opposed to just following the same thing, for 4 to 6 weeks at a time and then changing, you're essentially
There's
eliminating or
so much less cognitive demand with training when you just say,
yes,
this
yes,
is what
that's
I'm doing
exactly what it
today.
is.
This is
It's
what I'm doing
decision
today.
making fatigue.
I've had a
Every single
coach
time. Go
for
ahead.
I've had a coach since 2019 and I never had a coach before then and I'm a coach. Now I follow our programs, but like I was doing one-on-one with my coaching. I kind of I program my own running, but that's fine because I program it in like on top of what I'm doing. But like
Yeah.
I follow our app and our programs are at a coach, and I cannot tell you. People are like, well, I'm a coach or I'm a professional, so I don't need someone to tell me what to do. It's like, it's not that you don't know how to do it. It's that removes every other choice, decision, thought you're overthinking about that removes all of it. That like
Yep.
removes all of it. I cannot tell you finishing a PhD and having I paid to train with my friend who's a coach who works for me now during my PhD 3 days a week. I didn't need to pay up someone to train with me because for
Yeah.
me, while being in that season of life, that was the easiest thing for me to do was to show up and him to say, this is what we're doing. And
Yep.
I love doing the same workouts week after week after week. You know what you're doing. You know what you need to do in the gym. You don't have to think about it. You know what you did last week. You know what you're progressing. If you can lean into like it, not that it's boring and not novel and repetitive, but how do I get better at the same and not have to
Hmm.
think? I know that I'm like kind of overtaking this now at the end, but like those were like revolutionary like things for me when I
Hmm.
started doing that years ago. That was like mind shattering to me. And I'm like, oh, this everything's so much better and it's easier. Right? Like
Yeah.
it's just like so much better and easier.
Yep. Yep. 100% agree. We very, very briefly, talked about what our true topic was today, which was
I
hybrid
know, I'm
training.
sorry, guys.
No, No need to apologize, because this was an amazing conversation. And, I feel like, this is, again, one of those, sort of things where I'm going to need to get you back on, and we're actually
Yeah.
going to need to talk about stuff. But if people want, like, do you have any, like, if people are interested in hybrid training, where do they find you? And do you have any, like, beginners, like little beginners guides or ebooks that are freely available that people could, like, just look up and get more out of it?
Yeah. So one, I hang out the most on Instagram, but I'm pretty big on YouTube now too. By big, I mean I have like 16,000 subscribers, which is not nothing, right? Like that's not bad. I've been working
No,
really hard
that's
on that.
great.
So both of those are Dockless Fitness, and then I just renamed my podcast to the Hybrid Lab. It used to be called the Messy Middle.
Hmm.
I honestly think I had put out more free content than like anyone in the industry.
Yeah.
But I did just create it's like a 6-day email series called the Hybrid Blueprint
Oh,
recently,
nice.
because it was just getting people like, the step-by-step things of like what really is important. So I can give that link to you, and you can link that in your
Yeah.
notes below for people. Um, that kind of walks you through like the very foundational basics. And then of course, like I have an ebook hybrid that is actually does people really, really, really like for learning, whether that's for coaching or their own training and programming, that kind of walks through like the important big rocks of a lot of things I kind of alluded to here today.
Hmm.
But then other than that, I mean, I have so much free content that you could just dive in for a year on how much I
Yep.
have out there, honestly.
Yep. Yeah, that's where I'm at in terms of, like, my podcast has 100 episodes. And, so for those of you who didn't know that, go back
Go
and
back.
re-listen to all of these things, because I'm sure you'll take away more. Always posting more on, like, social media and like those sort of things. Go give Alyssa a follow. I have actually changed my Instagram, so if you want to reach out to me from this podcast, it's not Critical Oxygen anymore. It is Dr. Phil Batterson. That is my handle on Instagram. So go check me out there. If you have any questions for either of us, leave a comment down below. This will be on YouTube and it'll be on Spotify, or just reach out to us via direct message on Instagram. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next one.